Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host with the most, Brice Lewis. Obviously, you know what we do here on this podcast. We talk about everything basketball, all things basketball. Obviously, that's what I call the GSMC Basketball Show. And really, you know, what we're going to do today is we're obviously going to continue to give you updates on the NBA returning. Obviously, it's looking more and more likely. More and more news comes out. Obviously, I'm going to update you guys today. We're also going to talk some news and notes around the association, simple things that could be delayed, canceled. Also, some teams looking at potential players from this year's draft still, even though we don't know when the draft will be. And we'll also talk about everything else that is happening in basketball. But then also at the end of the show, obviously last week, I talked about my semifinals and first round matchups and my predictions for those matchups. Now I'm going to give you my predictions for the semifinals and the finals in the last two segments of today's show. So obviously, if you want to hear that, stay tuned for all that and more. But like I said, we're going to get into some initial stuff right away. And we're going to do this. Listen, the NBA Players Association has started to get on conference calls with teams and players to start discussing what basically is going to be the format and things that they would like to have when coming back to the NBA, as they're starting to get putting a lot of gears in motion for a return for the season. Obviously, you know, it's important that, you know, you hear what the players say, what they think would be beneficial and what would be helpful, because obviously, they're your number one priority. They're the reason why you get ratings. They're the reason why people watch. They're the reason why things happen. So your number one priority should always be your players and making sure that they're on top of their game at all times so they can be most successful. So, you know, that's going to be something to me that's big, obviously. You know, like I said, usually I would think, even though they're not going to say it too much right now, I would think most of the people that are probably getting called, clearly superstar players are getting called. Obviously, I feel like any team player that who is currently in the playoffs right now, I think they definitely are getting called, because I think they're targeting playoff teams. I think they really are targeting the camp, then the playoffs, not camp, regular season to finish out, then playoffs. I just don't think there's enough time based off what we hear, the schedule, whenever we hear, or when we heard when the season would actually end up probably starting, which is mid-July. There just isn't enough time to do regular season games. So them going into the playoffs is probably the most likely move, but I also think is the right move. And I think that's going to be something more beneficial moving into the future when you're talking about, you know, just what's best for the players moving forward. So also, you know, obviously COVID's also had an impact on other things around the NBA, such as the Hall of Fame. As the Hall of Fame ceremony now has been delayed and postponed. And they, again, with COVID-19, they don't know when they would actually do it. Now, this is something that I think people may look at and think, okay, yes, we usually like to honor them in person. But you could, unless you just really feel like it has to be in person, do this online. You could, you know, have them all on a Zoom or something like that. Obviously, you know, going with today's world, you know, how things are going. And, you know, allow every Hall of Famer to have a speech, you know, give the presentation, everything like that. It just depends. If things get better, then I think obviously they would probably still do the Hall of Fame ceremony. Maybe they might only do close friends and family. You know, obviously I don't think we're going to get the big Hall of Fame ceremony where you get the entire audience that you could get there. So obviously that would be the big thing, moving forward, going into the next point and everything like that. So I think obviously for me, that would be a pretty big deal. If, I'm a player in the Hall of Fame this year who's getting inducted, because I could definitely see them say, okay, let's hold out and see if potentially, could we still try to do it with an in-person ceremony, but at the same time understand, hey, if they have to do Zoom may be what we have to do, and I'm okay with that. I've accepted that, and I'm not going to be mad about it. So obviously that's going to be something to me that, you can't really be mad about. So, again, these are many, many things that the NBA is circling through, wondering about, trying to figure out, trying to see, what is the best way to still be able to honor the new Hall of Famers, but at the same time not lose too much of the prestige or the anticipation of the event of the Hall of Fame, especially since some people think this is probably one of the better Hall of Fame classes to go in a few years as well. So obviously, seems like maybe it was just a horrible year for it to strike, but I think it's more important that they just do what's right for everybody who's involved in the Hall of Fame, do what's right for the players, do what's right for, the families involved in this as well. Obviously, all of that is going to be probably top priority for the NBA moving forward as they're trying to make the best decisions possible, not just for the season, but in other terms of operations and other things that they have hosted and events they're going to have going into the future and going on into the off season, going into the next season, et cetera, going and just making sure that they can potentially put the best product out there while also keeping everybody safe. And so, really, obviously we've been reporting the NBA has been looking at two locations: Las Vegas and Disney World. Now there are reports that they may be just saying, okay, hold up, we're just going to have every game at Disney World. So if that is the case, then obviously, it still is fine, because even though the West Coast teams are traveling further, it potentially could be further away from their families. Even though that if it is true they can leave the bubble, maybe it's not the worst. At least everybody's in one place. You can keep an eye on everybody. You don't have to extenuate staff and everything, and you can do what you got to do to make everything successful. One thing I haven't heard about with this is the referees. I'm sure the referees have been still, involved and talking and trying to figure out what's going on. How would they be spread out potentially if they did do two venues? Like, what referees are you going to put here? What referees are you going to put here? Maybe that's why they are looking at Disney being just the sole place, because they don't want to do that. And they just want to put everybody in one place and say, there you go, that's the place, and you're going to stick you there. I mean, that really could be what was going on. What is the issue moving forward? So it really just depends. And so on and so forth. So, I think, like I said, Disney seems like clearly Disney seems like very clearly like this is the place that they're going to go. Like, this is the place they're going to end up. For sure. Because obviously I think Disney World gave the best presentation. And remember, Disney World is an absolutely huge venue, and there will be plenty of space to accommodate everybody. So maybe they feel like, we have a venue that can accommodate everybody instead of trying to split it into Western and Eastern venues. Maybe we just put everybody in the same place. So that way we keep eye on everybody, keep track of everybody. It may make easier for us as a league to be able to keep up with everything, so we can have the season run as operational as we can. Because like I said, we don't know what's being said in these meetings. We don't know what's really being said in general. And so they're just trying to make the best decisions moving forward, going into the future of the league, so they don't make anything happen that would be in the detriment of potentially of the players or anybody moving forward. But coming up next, the Knicks have LaMelo Ball as their number one point guard. I'll talk about that. Bradley Beal says he feels like Michael Jordan. I think a lot of people are misinterpreting what he means. But I'm also going to discuss with that, how does it feel as a star player to potentially play on losing teams? All that here and more on the podcast.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we discussed the NBA looking at a sole location in Disney, thinking that Disney will be the only place that players will go, and they will host every game from start to finish there, as they may not go with the 2-venue system and go with the 1-venue system, as they feel like that may be in the best case for the league, and also makes it easier for them to keep track of everything going on. We also discussed the NBPA, the Players Association, talking to the players, getting calls to the players, talking about what's going to happen when they come back, how they're feeling, what they would like to be comfortable, obviously trying to give fillers out, see what's going to be needed, as it looks like the league is gearing back up clearly. And also the NBA Hall of Fame has been delayed. We don't know when and how they're going to present it. And so it'll be interesting to see what they actually come up with when it comes to, okay, how are we going to go through with the Hall of Fame? Obviously, they don't really have to do it till after the season is over, so they might not actually make that big decision till after they play the season out. But, so, obviously I've discussed this before on the podcast. LaMelo Ball is now reportedly the number one player at the point guard position, keyword at the point guard position, not in the draft, at the point guard position. Donations, I'm playing. But at the point guard position in the draft, and if you listen, what that says basically is, again, if the Knicks, since we don't maybe know who they favor overall in the big board, which everybody thinks the number one pick will be Anthony Edwards, they don't necessarily need a big man because they have Mitchell Robinson. And their biggest need is point guard, not center, because they have a young up-and-coming player there. If the Knicks can get number 2 or number 3, unless depending on the number 2 team potentially, they are pretty much a very close shoo-in potentially to get LaMelo Ball. I mean, they might even get lucky and get the 4, depending on, like I said, the teams above them. And if they can get LaMelo Ball, like I said, I've talked about it before, I think the fit of LaMelo Ball seeming like he's a big-time player that you can market, big baller brand, LeVar, New York City, I think that'd be obviously one of the more ideal places that LeVar would want his sons. It feels like if he can be what people think he can be, LaMelo Ball has the potential to be a major star in the NBA if he could be part of the Knicks rebuild that gets them back to being competitive. I'm not going to say championship yet, but competitive. He would be credited with that if he could do that. And obviously that would be very, very big moving forward if all the young pieces came together. And now it feels like, okay, all these picks, all these young pieces we have drafted are now starting to get closer to paying off for us. And it doesn't feel like we're still going through another season of, yeah, we got some guys, but it's not all coming together. We still lose 60, 50 games a year. And, because obviously you don't want that. You don't want that to be the case continuously, clearly. And so it's going to be very important for any team to come out there and play their best game at all times. You don't want to go out there and put yourself in a weird position or in a position that could hurt you moving forward. You want to do what you got to do if you're the Knicks to put your franchise in a good position to be successful, so then your fans can start supporting you again. And the negative connotations that have developed over these years because of what's happened with the Knicks can now start to dissolve. Because listen, as much as it's very easy to clown on the Knicks and Knicks fans, the NBA is a better place when the NBA is thriving because the Knicks are thriving. Like, really. It's a better place. There are just certain teams that if they're good, the NBA is better. Because the Knicks have such a major franchise. There are so many Knicks fans all over the world. If they could just get a decent team, the NBA now has a reason to put them in primetime games. Because it's very easy to put the Knicks in primetime games because of that. And then, if they could be competitive, you're still getting huge ratings because it's the Knicks. And definitely, like I said, if LaMelo Ball ends up being what they think, he could definitely be a big part of why that is. And if he is, then obviously that's going to bode well for the Knicks. So, Bradley Beal made a comment this past week talking about The Last Dance. Obviously, still people giving reviews about that amazing 10-part series that we all watched. And he said that sometimes he feels like Jordan. And I think a lot of people were up in arms about, whoa, Bradley, you're good, but you're not Michael Jordan. You're not good like him. You're not a leader like him. You're nothing like Jordan. How are you like Jordan? And I think Bradley was not necessarily referring to in terms of, the winning, but in terms of sometimes, I don't want to say he was taking a shot at his teammates, but think about all the times that Jordan got on his teammates, even through all the winning. Like, obviously, some people think they bullied him. Some people think he was very hard on them. Everything like that. And I think that's how Bradley kind of felt. You could see Jordan's frustration. And I feel like Beal felt the same way. And I think that's why he kind of said, I feel like him sometimes. And the frustration of not sometimes winning and sometimes feeling like the team could have done better and they don't. I feel like that's what Bradley Beal meant. I don't think he was actually meaning legitimately that he felt like, I feel like Jordan sometimes. Like, I literally feel like I'm that good. He's just saying that I understand how he felt, his emotions in certain situations, in certain times. I understand. I felt that before. And obviously Bradley Beal's been through a lot, especially the last 2 years playing on a losing team. 2-3 years now, he's played on a losing team. And so, and people don't understand, it's hard to win this league. Of course, it's one of the hardest things to do. But it's also hard to lose. And what I mean is, think about if you're a star player. You're going out every night, putting up your numbers, putting up big stats, feeling like you're out here busting your butt, night in and night out, to put your team in position to win. And at least 80 to 70% of the time, you're losing. Or you're getting blown out. That's tough. It really wears on you mentally. You ever been in a situation in your life where you always feel like you did your best work, but it was never appreciated, or it felt like it was undervalued, or it felt like it never had the chance to reach the potential it could have reached because it was never put in position to, even though you feel like your work was probably better than some that were put in that position? That's how I think Bradley Beal feels sometimes with the Wizards. And just teams that think about Devin Booker. He's been losing every year since he's got to the league. Think about how that weighs on him. Knowing that I'm out here dropping 25 a game and we can barely win 30 games. Think about how that feels on him. He feels like he's doing his part day in and day out. And they're not winning. Think about Trae Young. This past season, 30-9. The team couldn't even get 30 wins. Think about how he felt. They barely got to 20. So it's frustrating to lose. It's hard to lose in the NBA because it really wears. Because think about a player who's just a good or decent player at a losing team. Of course you don't like losing, but it doesn't wear on you as much. Where if you are a player who's of a higher level of talent and you lose, it weighs on you. It really, really does. It just makes you feel like, dang, what is going on here? Why aren't we able to do what we have to do to be successful? And again, of course, you're not going to always make it seem like you play a perfect game, but it's like, dang, I'm out here dropping career nights out here and we're still losing. That clearly weighs on any player that's in a losing situation. And that's why sometimes you see players in losing situations, especially star players, get disgruntled. But I'll continue on in this discussion in the next segment, just a little bit longer, about some other things I want to touch on. And I'm also going to talk about next segment, a 16-team playoff, as obviously that's being mentioned once again in the news. All that right here and more on the podcast.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about LaMelo Ball joining the Knicks, as obviously that would be, if that works and LaMelo Ball can be the point guard the Knicks have needed for years, that could definitely jumpstart the Knicks becoming more of a competitive team once again. And I talked about how the NBA is a better place if the Knicks are thriving because of just how big the Knicks brand and how big they are as a fan base. And obviously, it would be much easier to put them in primetime games because, once the Knicks win, it's like, okay, put them in there. So obviously, if all that comes together, they get LaMelo Ball, they start being a competitive team, all it can do is just end up being more, better for the league when it gets down to it. So, you know how that goes. But also, I was discussing, how hard is it to lose in the NBA? And I just want to continue to touch on it a little bit more here, because another thing we have to think about when you lose in the NBA is you got to think about this. Some people wonder sometimes why don't players leave sooner from losing situations. And I think one reason why is because as a player, you never think the situation you're in is going to stay this way. You never think, first 2-3 years of losing, we're going to continue to lose. Because if they bring in maybe a good player here, a good piece here, a nice coach there, you think, okay, well, we can only go up, right? And so, you're still getting your numbers. And this is more towards guys who get drafted to bad teams and they stay bad. Think about the Wizards. The first couple of 2-3 years of John Wall's career, they weren't good. They weren't making the playoffs. They weren't. But he sticked it out and they started winning. You don't always win at first. You don't always win at first. And so I think players just want to do their due diligence and just think, okay, there's no way that if I stayed, okay, think about it, the players getting drafted at 19, okay? Let's say you could stay there for a max of 8 years, potentially 9 years. So by the time you get out the league, or by the time you get out, you're 26, maybe 25, 27, depending on what age. You'll still be in your prime. Also, obviously the money, because if you stay with a team, obviously the league wants to reward teams to keep players there. Well, if you stay with the team, you'll get paid even more money if you stay. So obviously that's another reason why players stay. But ultimately, I just think you never sit here and think your team's going to be bad for all 8 years of you being there. You don't. You realistically think there's no way we could go almost close to a decade of just losing. There's just no way. You got me. All you need is maybe another star put beside me in a decent roster, and we can at least be competitive. And then after that, when that second contract hits, and being competitive isn't good enough and we're not competing for champions, then we'll talk about potentially going outside of the team and looking at my other options, potentially somewhere else. And then obviously, again, it depends on the player. How loyal are they to the franchise? How badly do they want to win rings? What's more important to them, winning it where they were drafted, winning it just to win it, to get rings? All of that is going to be a big question. Because listen, nobody wants to be in a city their entire career just lose. even if you could get those 3 to 2 or 4 years of winning, it feels like, for those players probably, dang, I finally did something for the city. Even if we don't win the championship, just because at least they're not losing. If I can put this franchise in a better shape than I left it, why would I be mad? But at the same time, losing can be tough on you mentally. And so that's why you have players like Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant. Even though Kevin Durant didn't necessarily lose, he just wasn't winning the big game. But obviously Anthony Davis lost games, and we get first round exits. And players like Devin Booker's not winning right now. That's why a lot of people think Devin Booker won't resign next time his contract is up with the Suns. Because it's just hard to continue to be in a losing situation, and it feels like, are we ever going to move up? Is our franchise that dysfunctional? All of that is just a big thing. You don't want to feel like you're stuck in this mediocrity pool for the rest of your life. So that's going to be the big thing moving forward. But, so, now I'm going to switch over to another topic about the league's been talking about. So the NBA is now bringing back up talks about a 16-team playoff. Obviously, this idea has been gaining traction. A lot more people have been becoming more intrigued by the idea. I think a lot of people think that would be a smart idea. Because obviously, again, this is mainly because you have a lot of good Western Conference teams, usually year by year. And then you have a very bottom half of the Eastern Conference, not really good teams. And you just think you really have those 2-3 series in the first round of the playoffs that no one cares about. That nobody is invested in because they know what's going to happen. Because it's that big of it's different if the eighth seed of the West won 46 games and the top seed in the West won 60. That's only a 14 game difference, and they both are clearly they're both over 500. It's another thing if you're in the Eastern Conference, you won 62 games and the team you're playing won 38. That's almost a 30 game difference, and they're 4 games under or 3 games under 500. It's just different. It feels like the level of competition is different. It feels like they're really getting bye weeks, as they so to say. And so I think the league wants to make a 16 seed playoff because, listen, the best 16 teams get in, and then we truly, you can sit here and say, no, who are the 16 best teams that year, and you can now all get in. Because think about the bottom of the Eastern Conference this year, and then the bottom of the Western Conference. They would be technically competing right now for, the 8th, 7th, maybe potentially 6th spots in the draft. All of that is very important. All of that is big. All of that is great. And I think the NBA, that's what they're looking for. It's just to increase revenue, obviously, because if every series is interesting, that means more people are going to watch your series, which means ratings will be better for TV programs. Because think about that one, think about the Milwaukee, I think it's Milwaukee and Magic matchup. Nobody wants to watch that game. Nobody wants to watch that series. And they're going to, and you're going to have to carry it out on your network and not get ratings because of that. And then they usually if you notice with their scheduling, they like to put it against another big game, or they put it in the NBA TV slot, or they try to put it on maybe ESPN2. Obviously, first game, we're going to put it on ESPN, ABC, sure. After that, we're going to put you on the lesser channels because we know not as many people want to watch you. And we're going to put, obviously, our biggest games on the top channels because that's going to get us our ratings. That's what's going to get us our money. So, obviously, that's going to be, a strategy that they obviously implore during the season because they want to make sure they maximize again on ratings and everything like that. And I think the 16-team playoff would be a great idea. I think, listen, it will cause much of a higher grade of just, okay, you got to get good. You can't be playing around. You got to get good if you want to make it. If we have a good 16 teams, maybe all the teams could potentially be very close of not at 500 over. So you legitimately in the Eastern Conference cannot have a losing record and make it anymore potentially. You may legitimately have to have at least 500 or higher to get into the playoffs, which I think is what the NBA wants. Is they're obviously looking for more ways to have competitive games, competitive balance, competitive series, competitive everything. Because they know competitiveness brings ratings because people now know, oh, this is going to be good to watch. This is going to be interesting to watch. Different things are going to happen. And it just provides more of a excitement to the game when you know there is a much of uncertainty that is there and it's not as predictable or as quote unquote boring, so to say. But that's all we have right here for this segment. Coming up next, overseas basketball has now been canceled as the Euro leagues and Australian leagues have canceled their seasons. What's next for overseas players? We don't talk about overseas players a lot, but what's next for them? And also other basketball news. All that right here and more on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we discussed the NBA. Basically, for the most part, thinking that a 16-team playoff would be what's best for the league. As obviously, again, they're just trying to have the 16 best teams, regardless of conference, in the playoffs to give the most compelling matchups and the best series from first round to finals. Creates more storylines and definitely adds more competitive edge to every team in the league. I also finished up my how hard is it to win rant, I guess, or informational sit down, about, why players sometimes go through the struggle of having a hard time winning and how hard it is to lose. How it wears on you mentally, how, especially for star players in losing environments, how it feels like I'm doing literally everything I think I can and it's not working out. All of it. We discussed all that and more. But now we're going to get into overseas basketball. The Euro and Australian leagues canceled their seasons. So where does this leave teams or players, so to say, from these leagues that may have played sometimes before the regular season for basketball and then, or would come back after the season's over to play in the NBA, or other players who may have been using the league to prepare for the draft, training, all of that all of it's canceled. What does that mean? I mean, shoot, you even got Rucker Park in street ball league that they run in New York, and Rucker Park is canceled because of COVID. So, but I'm just using that just to let people know. But yeah, so basically, that's big. That's big. That's huge to me, because for me, I think that it's important that we realize, you still have a lot of guys who play these leagues to try to get back into the league, to still be able to ball because they still want to ball, to be able to still improve their games, to potentially go to the league, for the first time, like younger players. And so obviously that could have a big trickle-down effect because now they don't have that platform. And one risk that we could take potentially if things in college, especially college sports and everything, becomes canceled, how are you going to be able to show scouts and new teams what you can do after a year? What improvements you made? How did you improve your game? What have you learned? Your body built. You can still build your body, but still, okay, let's see it in action. Or do you know how to use it to its fullest potential, et cetera, et cetera? All of those questions will be answered if you have a season, Euro, college, Australia, and all of it. And with it canceled, well, where can you do it? That's going to be the big question. That's going to be the big situation. And I think that's where a lot of people are looking to see, what is going to be the move moving forward. That's the big question. And I think that one thing we have to take into account is that we all want to be the best we can. And we want to have the opportunities to be put in position to be the best we can as well. Because all of that is important. And I think, especially from the EuroLeague, because the EuroLeague's produced so many players in the NBA now. Luka, Dirk, Manu, a lot of some of the sharpshooters, Willie Gomez, all of them came from the EuroLeagues because of, obviously, the league improving their game and everything. Just all of the things that would have contributed to them having a more successful chance at being a top guy coming from the league. Because you see it all the time in NBA drafts where sometimes lottery picks are overseas guys, never played a lick of college basketball or G League ball. Straight Euro, straight other leagues, but they have the skills and the skill set, and they were able to prove it on a night in and night out basis out there that they're just as good as some of the American players that are out here. Like, really. And now that that's been taken away from them, how are they going to respond? How are they going to come back from that? Because like I said, if there's any types of cancellations into the future too, it could mess up potential teams and players for the next year of potential NBA draft prospects or guys who, like I said, want to get back into the league and we're hoping to use the leagues to get back into the league. Obviously, all of that is extremely important. A lot of it is. And it brings up another question that I want to discuss here. Since the Euro Leagues and everything have been canceled, would that mean an increase in more players in general who still want to attempt to play basketball? Maybe seeing more Euro League players converting over to the G League potentially. Because if the NBA plays their season, you would think, okay, they must be then comfortable enough to have a G League season coming up and an NBA season the next year. So would you see maybe an influx of players trying to come over to the G League potentially? So that way they could have basically an increasement in players wanting to join, which obviously would start to create competition within the G League for players trying to make it on the teams, which obviously could be beneficial because obviously that creates better talent in these leagues. It makes it even more enticing for maybe young top players coming out of college. I believe right now there's a guy in the 2021 draft class or the class coming out of high school that's trying to decide, does he go to a big university or does he go to the G League? If you can now say I'm playing against grown men from Euro leagues and I'm playing against some of the top young prospects coming from the 2021 class, and then some guys who have been in the NBA system, played, developed their game, has been called up to main rosters before, that sounds like a pretty enticing pool of talent to play against. And if you can show your stuff against them, wouldn't that maybe make you feel more comfortable about potentially taking them? Like, really? I think it would. I think it would make you feel very good about it. And I don't see why you, as a player, trying to, obviously make a name for yourself in the league, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want that to be, where you go to hopefully did put yourself over the top and benefit yourself the most, again, when it comes to making a roster, getting playing time, and really showing that you can play at the next level. Because that's really what it's all about. It's just trying to prove yourself to the scouts, prove yourself to teams, getting an opportunity and a chance, because that's what every player, everybody wants, just opportunities and chances. Let's go out there, play their best, win, compete at a high level, all of it. So, obviously, that's going to be the big thing moving forward, and obviously every team's going to try to do what they got to do to be most successful at the end of the day when it gets down to it. So, that's just how I feel about it. And so on and so forth. So it's just going to be very interesting what happens moving forward to me. It's going to be very interesting what happens moving forward to me. But, coming up next, I'm going to go into the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, my predictions on the matchups that I had from last week, breaking down each matchup individually, and give you everything that you need to know, in my opinion, and my predictions of what's going to happen if those were the matchups that I project to be, and who would be the victors of each matchup and why. Stay tuned for all that and more right here on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we discussed overseas players getting their seasons canceled. What does this mean for them? I discussed that it could actually lead to an uptick and an increase in players then now going to the G League. Because the G League is the only league up and running, and you still have aspirations to make it to the league, improve your game, have new fresh tape. That may be the only league running that you can get into, unless, obviously, excluding the players who are trying to get into the draft, clearly. So all that would be interesting, you know, if the G League somehow could maybe potentially furthermore take advantage of what's going on right now with COVID-19. But now we're going to get into my Western Eastern Conference predictions and breakdowns. My predictions are based off my last week's show about who I thought won in the first round of the Western and the Eastern and semifinals. I will go through what I discussed. In the first round, the Lakers and Grizzlies, I thought the Lakers would win. I picked the Thunder to upset the Jazz. I picked the Rockets to upset the Nuggets. And I picked the Clippers to beat the Mavericks. In the Eastern Conference, I picked the Bucks to beat the Magic, the Heat to beat the Pacers, the Celtics to beat the 76ers, and the Raptors to beat the Nets. In the semifinals, I picked the Lakers to beat the Thunder and the Clippers to beat the Rockets. In the Eastern Conference, I picked the Bucks to beat the Heat, and I picked the Celtics to beat the Raptors. So now we have the Western Conference Lakers and Clippers, obviously the matchup everybody wants to see, and the Eastern Conference Bucks and Celtics, how a lot of people were starting to trend towards that being the conference final. And I'm going to start in the Eastern Conference before going to the West. So, Bucks, Celtics. Boston, obviously a legendary franchise. Great roots. young up-and-coming superstar player in Jason Tatum, clutch shot maker Kemba Walker, all-star Jaylen Brown, and one of the better scorers in the league in Gordon Hayward, going against a Milwaukee team who, in the last 2 regular seasons, have looked like the most dominant team in the NBA, as they always are first in defensive efficiency and offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. You have Giannis, someone that people think would have won the MVP again this year at this rate that he was going, still might, and be back-to-back MVP. And obviously the Bucks were trending towards potentially getting 60 wins and even getting maybe very, very close to 70, since they were still in the vicinity of getting that. So this matchup has a lot of interesting variables to it. The Celtics, to me, are the team that matches up best with the Milwaukee Bucks, in my opinion, because the one thing about Milwaukee, and the thing that everybody's waiting to see if they're going to be a true title contender, what does the rest of the supporting cast outside of Giannis do? What does Chris Middleton do, more importantly? If Chris Middleton gives them a 15-point, 16-game series, they're losing, to me. That Giannis needs more than that. He needs Chris Middleton to at least get 20. And he needs everybody else, the Lopez twins and George Hill and DiVincenzo and Wesley Matthews. He needs all of them to play some of their best basketball, because they can't come out, I think, with the team that they have and come out lackadaisical or just think Giannis is going to do everything. Because it's not a matter of Giannis is the best player on the floor, because he is. He's the best player on the floor in this series. But you know who has the next 4 after that, potentially? The Boston Celtics. Some people think Jaylen Brown's better than Chris Middleton. Some people think Gordon Hayward's better than Chris Middleton if put in the same role that Chris Middleton was put in. It could be Giannis, the 4 Boston Celtics, then Chris Middleton, potentially. So, obviously, you don't want that. That may be how it looks on paper, but you actually want, in terms of play, Giannis, Tatum, Middleton, then maybe a Jaylen Brown or a Kemba Walker, to even things out, at least in the top 4. You don't want it to be a one-sided affair. You definitely do not want it to be a one-sided affair. To me, I look at this series and I think to myself, I'm going to go with Boston here. Boston in 7. I think Giannis will be denied another year of making it to the NBA Finals, which could obviously create some serious doubt, but I think Boston, by this time, COVID-19 should not be affecting these teams anymore, as obviously they've gone through 2 playoff rounds, a series of games to get themselves back into going shape and into good playing chemistry and rhythm. And I just think Boston just has more that they can depend on from an offensive perspective, and they're also still one of the better defensive teams in the NBA as well. And as long as Jason Tatum plays like we saw him play before the shutdown, I don't see why they couldn't. If Jason Tatum does not play like that, then you would go inside with Milwaukee. But I think the Celtics in 7 will be the team representing the Eastern Conference in the 2020 NBA Finals. So now, we're going to the Western Conference, and the big matchup that everybody wants to see. Lakers and Clippers. Obviously, this will be a very tough matchup. I think there's no way it doesn't go more than 7 games. I mean, no less than 7. Both teams are evenly matched. Both teams have superstars all over the court, star players, depth. The only excited advantage in this matchup is potentially in coaching, because I think many people would agree that Doc Rivers is the better coach in this series. So I think that obviously this is going to come down to the superstars. If Anthony Davis and LeBron dominate, I think they have more of a dominating factor to them than Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So I feel they could take over the series and be able to make more of an impact. Where I think the Clippers' key to the series is the depth. Paul George and Kawhi gonna do their thing. But you need Lou to have big games. You need Trez to have big games. You need everybody to come in there and have big games. Because you're gonna need that third, fourth guy to keep up with them. You don't need that guy. You know? Because listen, we can sit here and say the Lakers don't have a third guy. But listen, y'all forgot they signed Dion Waiters. If Dion Waiters can be the resemblance of what Dion Waiters used to be, they got a third guy. And they still got Kuzma too. So they could go 3-4 to match up with the Clippers 3-4. So it's gonna come down to a lot. This series goes either way. I honestly think with the layoff happening, I think that this will lead to the Lakers winning this series in 7. If the layoff didn't happen, I go Clippers 7. But with the layoff happening, I just think Clippers in 7. Not Clippers, but Lakers in 7. I think the Lakers are going to represent the Western Conference in the NBA Finals, and we'll get a old school rivalry Boston LA Lakers matchup, as the Clippers have yet to get past the big brothers of LA and the Lakers. And if you want to know my breakdown for the NBA Finals, my projected NBA Finals, stay tuned to the podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, I broke down the Western Conference, Eastern Conference Finals matchups, what I thought, the projections that I thought would happen. I had both series going to 7, but I had the Celtics coming out of the conference, defeating the Milwaukee Bucks, a highly contested series. And I just think that Boston has more dependable people than the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee will win the series if the people that we have questions on perform. If they don't, but I believe Boston will win the series because we know they're going to show up to play. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think Boston's players are going to show up and they're going to win. But I also have the Lakers beating the Clippers. And the only reason why I say that is I just have this feeling that this layoff is going to help LeBron more than it helps Kawhi. And it's going to help the Lakers overcome the Clippers in 7 games. Again, a highly contested 7-game series. I expect it to be probably one of the best series we've seen in a while in a Western Conference final matchup. And I expect both teams to come out playing at the highest level, competing at the highest level, and doing what they need to do to be successful at the end of the day. So, for me, I think that in this matchup between the Celtics and the Lakers, an old school matchup, an old school rivalry, obviously all the old heads would love it, all the history between these two franchises, that alone sets up for a very highly contested, highly emotional finals. between the two teams. And so, for me, if you look at the best players on both sides, obviously LeBron James considerably one of the best players, if not the best player in the NBA today. Jason Tatum has developed himself into potentially a top 10 player. So that creates a high level of, high pressure, big superstar moments. Because you have to think about this. Remember the last time these two met? Eastern Conference Finals. It went 7 games. Tatum was a rookie. LeBron trying to carry that Cleveland team to the finals. It was tough, and I expect this to be another tightly contested matchup. Except Tatum's obviously 2 years more older and a much better player. Jaylen Brown's much more mature. They added a guy like Kemba Walker. Gordon Hayward's actually playing. LeBron, though, obviously is coming back with a way better roster than he had in Cleveland. He has Anthony Davis. He has, Kyle Kuzma, Dion Waiters, the Rondo kid. And so, obviously that makes and creates a very big deal. Both teams are one of the better offensive teams and defensive teams. The mismatch in this series for Boston is in the paint. That has probably been the weakness of Boston. They don't really have any big men that are like really good. Before their big men were kind of a strength. Now, with a lot of guys that they've lost, it's kind of like a weakness. Like, do they have enough front court depth and front court players, and sometimes just enough bench players to really be able to compete? Because the Lakers can go 10 deep if needed, even though I'm sure they don't want to have to do it all the time. But can Boston trust Williams and other guys, unproven guys who are now getting the chance to play this year? Or are they going to have to be top-heavy driven by their top forward? And then Marcus Smart. It's going to be a matchup of contrasting styles. Because I do feel like Boston has the advantage in the backcourt. Because I think that in terms of guard play, I think Boston has better guards. So, but I do feel like the big man matchup is a bigger gap. So, with that gap there, it's going to create a much more bigger situation with Boston that they have to make up for. Because they can't just come into the game and then just think, well, if we do this, we'll be fine. If we do this, we'll be fine. If we can get enough scoring, we'll be fine. Anthony Davis could really dominate in this series. And so Boston has to figure out how they want to do this. Now, one lineup I think they could have a lot of success in is if they go small. And they put Tatum at the 4. But obviously, I think this would only work if the Lakers were willing to play that game, which I don't think they will. Because they can go 80 McGee, 80 Dwight, 80, one of them. Or if they wanted to go small, they could. Potentially. Maybe go with Kuzma at the 4. And then you have Tatum on him. Then you got Davis, whoever they feel like on Boston is the best guy to start at the center position in that position. And then you got, Kemba, Brown, Hayward, and then the Lakers obviously go with LeBron, Kuzma, obviously I've already said, AD on the floor. They could probably plug Avery Bradley in, and maybe even a Dion Waiters if they feel like that was the best lineup for them at that moment. And so, when it comes to coaching, Brad Stevens is regarded as one of the best coaches in the NBA. And that's one thing about the matchups that Lakers are going to go through is in a lot of the series, they won't have the best coach. But they just have the more superior talent. And that's usually what creates, to me, a bigger and better overall dynamic, because it's like it basically shows you, well, we don't maybe have the best coach, but we have a competent coach, and then we have great players. Where Boston, they could take advantage of that if he can out-coach Frank Vogel. If he can, but the only thing that can affect that is if LeBron and AD go off. If LeBron and AD go off, it doesn't matter if you can out-coach him. So, in that situation, you gotta make sure your players are going off if you're Boston, to at least attempt to even that out a little bit. And then, really, overall, I think both teams could be evenly matched at the end of the day, potentially. Like, really, I think they could be evenly matched. And so, it's going to really come down to who just makes the big plays, who makes the big stuff, makes the big stops. But I'm going to go and say, with my prediction, that the Los Angeles Lakers will win the NBA Finals, and LeBron James will get his 4th ring in 7 against the Celtics. I think they'll pull it out. Obviously, Boston had a great run. Obviously, huge confidence for the future, clearly, with them. But I think LeBron's going to get his 4th championship. And then regardless if you think there's an asterisk because of COVID and everything, I'm sure LeBron's going to get that 4th ring, and then y'all are somehow going to create arguments the next day. Well, this actually makes him worse. This is even more worse than Jordan, because he had to get his 4th ring during a COVID season. As an asterisk, it doesn't count. He has 3.5 to me. I'm sure you have those people out there. But I think LeBron's going to get his 4th ring this year, and I think he'll be getting ready to defend it for another year next year, which I think next year, if everything goes as planned, I would think the Clippers would maybe be able to win next year. But that's obviously very wayward thinking. But so that's my prediction on the entire NBA playoffs. In my champion from the all conferences at the end of the day. But thank you for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you for listening. I appreciate y'all listening to me, making me a part of your day. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Don't also forget to leave a review, comment, all of that. Also, please stay safe out there. You know, obviously I know a lot of y'all are starting to go out again. Just make sure you're still being a little safe. Don't be too reckless. And hopefully you'll be back next time so we can talk some more basketball. Thank you and good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.